Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Arthur Davies thought he had buried the past the day he walked away without explanation, leaving Eleanor heartbroken and alone, but fate had other plans. Years later, a chance encounter on a crowded city street shattered the walls he had built. Eleanor was there, and beside her stood a boy with the same deep brown eyes as his own. Haunted by regret and the lies that had stolen years from them, Arthur is forced to confront the truth. Eleanor raised their son alone. Torn between anger, pain, and a love she never fully let go of, Eleanor struggles to protect her child from more heartbreak. Arthur, determined to prove he has changed, begins the slow, fragile journey of earning back their trust. But forgiveness is not easily given, and one question lingers over them both. Can love survive betrayal, or has too much time already been lost? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. He disappeared without a single word, leaving nothing behind but silence. Years later, destiny placed an unexpected twist in his path. Eleanor had carried on with her life and with a child, his child. Could Arthur ever repair the damage he caused, or had time already closed that door forever? The late afternoon sky stretched wide, brushed with faint streaks of orange fading into heavy clouds. Headlights bounced off damp asphalt as the city roared around Arthur Davies, who sat trapped in traffic. One hand gripped the wheel, the other drummed against his thigh. A long day had drained him, but nothing could prepare him for what was about to happen. As the light turned red, his gaze drifted. On the sidewalk stood a woman, holding a boy's hand near a bench. Arthur's chest tightened with an uneasy recognition. The slope of her shoulders, the tilt of her head when she spoke. It couldn't be. And then she turned. Eleanor. Her name struck him like a jolt of lightning, tearing open wounds he thought were buried. His breath caught. But it wasn't just Eleanor. The boy at her side had the same deep brown eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Arthur's blood turned cold. The resemblance was undeniable. The light turned green. Horns blared behind him. But the world around Arthur blurred. Acting on instinct, he opened the car door and stepped into the street, his pulse thundering in his ears. Each step toward Eleanor felt dreamlike, dragging him back into a past he had abandoned. When she noticed him, her expression shifted instantly. Years had carved strength into her once soft features. Her eyes were sharp, cold, guarded, a wall he had never seen in her before. "Eleanor, is it really you?" His voice was rough, trembling with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" she shot back. Her tone steady, though her hand trembled as she adjusted the boy's backpack. Arthur's gaze fell again on the child. The likeness gnawed at him. His words slipped out before he could stop them. Is he my son?" Silence pressed down like a weight. The boy remained unaware, fidgeting with a toy in his hand. Eleanor's eyes glimmered with emotions Arthur couldn't decipher: sorrow, anger, maybe even regret. "Does it even matter now, Arthur?" Her words sliced through him. He wanted to scream yes, that nothing mattered more. But one look at her rigid stance told him the truth. He had no right to demand answers. Not anymore. Eleanor turned, pulling the boy closer as she walked away. Arthur stood frozen, watching them vanish into the rhythm of city life as if nothing had changed. But for him, everything had shattered. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. The boy's face haunted him, but it was Eleanor's indifference that broke him. Memories clawed back. The anonymous envelope, The damning photos, the accusations of betrayal. He remembered the blind rage, the hasty packing, the blocked calls. He never gave Eleanor a chance to speak now. Years later, the truth gnawed at him. If the boy truly was his, Eleanor had endured it all alone. When his phone rang and Andrea's name lit the screen, he answered with heavy reluctance. "You sound awful," she said gently. "I saw her today," Arthur confessed. "She has a son." Andrea's voice sharpened with quiet suspicion. "Are you certain he's yours? If so, why wouldn't she tell you? Doesn't that strike you as strange?" Arthur faltered. Doubt wormed its way into him. Andrea pressed on, her tone deceptively soft. "What if she's lying?" But fate had more revelations in store. Days later, a message appeared on his phone. "Know the truth before it's too late." Attached were screenshots of Andrea and Mark's private conversation. "If he finds out we set it up, we're finished. Relax. He'll never know. I made it look like Eleanor betrayed him. He believed it. He always trusted me." Arthur's hands shook as rage surged through him. Andrea, the one person he thought had stood by him, had been the very architect of his misery. Confronting her, he threw the evidence onto her glass table. "You did this," he growled. "You stole years from me, from Eleanor, from my son." Andrea's mask cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. "I only wanted to protect you. No, you wanted to keep me for yourself." His voice was colder than she had ever heard. "You destroyed everything." Arthur left without looking back. Mark was next. He found him slumped in a bar, and without hesitation, Arthur's fist met his jaw. Blood trickled from Mark's mouth. But instead of anger, he gave a bitter laugh. "I had debts. Andrea paid me. I didn't think." Arthur stepped back. Mark wasn't worth it. Nothing could undo the years lost. At last, standing before Eleanor's door, Arthur's chest heaved. He knocked, and when she appeared, exhaustion shadowing her face, the words spilled out. "I know the truth. The boy, he's mine, isn't he?" Her laugh was bitter. "Now you want the truth." After disappearing for 4 years, Arthur's throat tightened. "I was a fool." Her eyes filled with pain and fury. "No, Arthur. You didn't just vanish from me. You vanished from him, our son, and nothing can change that." Arthur's heart splintered. He wanted to beg, to fall to his knees. But Eleanor's cold gaze told him what words never could. "It might already be too late. I should have talked to you. I should have listened to you." She took a deep breath, squeezing her eyes shut for an instant before looking at him again. You didn't want to listen to me, Arthur. You just erased me from your life." A heavy silence fell between them. Arthur wanted to find a way to fix all this, but he knew apologies weren't enough. Eleanor bit her lip, hesitating, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost a whisper. "Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning and wonder how you're going to raise a child alone? How you're going to explain to him that his father never wanted to know him?" He closed his eyes for a second, feeling a suffocating pain pierce his chest. "I never wanted to, but it's what you did," she interrupted him, her voice loaded with frustration. "You forced me to move on alone. You made me hate you." Those words were a punch to the stomach. He felt his knees weaken as if he were being crushed by the weight of his own guilt. Elena crossed her arms, looking away. "And now you come back thinking you can just step into that role, that you can be the father he never had." Arthur, in his hands over his face, exhausted. I don't know, but I want to try. Shallored again, but this time there was something broken in the sound. You lost your chance. He felt his chest tightened. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but nothing. Arthur, you made your decision. I made mine. Her breathing became irregular. She raised her hand, interrupting anything he was about to say. I don't know if I can let you be his father. The silence that followed was devastating. Arthur felt his world spin. Elena blinked rapidly, pushing away any tears that threatened to fall, and took a deep breath before straightening her shoulders. Go, Arthur. He opened his mouth, but there was nothing left to say. His feet seemed glued to the floor, his heart pounding against his ribs. Bov knew. He knew that, however much it hurt, that wasn't a decision for him to make. With a lump in his throat, he nodded slowly, took a step back, and without another word, turned and left. This time, Eleanor was the one who watched him go. The pain of a past mistake. What would you do in Eleanor's shoes? Can she ever truly forgive him? Or is it too late for a second chance? Share your feelings in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the final emotional conclusion. Eleanor remained there, standing in front of the closed door, unable to move. The sound of Arthur's footsteps fading down the hallway gradually died out, but the pressure in her chest remained overwhelming. She swallowed, blinking rapidly to push away the burning in her eyes. But the truth was, something inside her had already broken again. Her legs weakened. The air seemed too heavy, suffocating. She reached out her hand to the doorknob, as if for a second her mind considered opening that door and calling him back. But reason was stronger. Her fingers closed on empty air, trembling, and she let out a long sigh before stepping back. Her fingerprints still marked by the pressure against the wood. Eleanor turned and walked into the house, her steps unsteady. She felt her heart pounding in her chest in a way that made her ears ring, but she refused to give in. When she finally reached Thesafer, she collapsed onto it, holding her face in her hands. She didn't want Tokri. She had already cried too much. But there was something cruel about reliving that pain, as if every word spoken that night had ripped open with its own nails to wounds that had taken years to heal. What hurt most was not the anger, not even the resentment. It was the suffocating feeling that no matter how hard she tried, Arthur still held a space inside her that she couldn't erase. A gentle touch on her arm brought her back to reality. She quickly raised her head, wiping her face with the back of her hands before turning. The child watched her with those deep brown eyes, so similar to Arthur's, his expression laden with sleep and curiosity. "Mummy," Eleanor's chest tightened. "What is it, darling?" Her voice came out low, trembling. The child tilted his head sighed, observing her intently. "Are you sad?" She forced a smile. But even for a child, the lie was transparent. "I'm just tired, sweetheart." He looked at her for a few more seconds, as if trying to understand something much bigger than he could comprehend, then simply came closer and hugged her waist, resting his face on her chest. Eleanor closed her eyes tightly, feeling tears well up again. Her son, her boy, the only reason she had stayed strong all those years. She ran her fingers through the child's soft hair, stroking him in silence. It was then that Sarah's voice resonated in her mind. "Maybe you should let Arthur get close to his son." Her chest immediately constricted. What if he leaves again? The silence that followed that memory was the same one her friend had given her, because deep down there was no answer. Time passed unnoticed. The child fell asleep, leaning on her chest, and she remained there motionless, just listening to his breathing, feeling his small, innocent heart beating softly. What if Arthur didn't leave this time? What if he really regretted it? Doubt crept into her mind like a poison dot. She looked towards the window where the city glowed outside. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to admit something she had been suffocating within her since the moment she saw Arthur in that square. She still loved him, and that was what terrified her most. Eleanor spent the rest of the night awake, lying in bed, unable to sleep. The weight of what she felt consumed her from the inside out. Admitting to herself that she still loved Arthur was like opening a wound that she had tried to heal for years. She closed her eyes and saw his face, his eyes full of regret, the way his voice trembled as he asked for forgiveness. And no matter how much she wanted to hate him, no matter how much tried to cling to the pain as a shield, the truth was that a part of her wanted to believe him. But what if Shaw was wrong? What if he left again? She couldn't let her son go. Through that, the first days after that night were a test of endurance. Arthur didn't come looking for her again. And for a moment, Eleanor thought that perhaps he had understood the message. But then, the next morning, when she took her son to school, she saw a car discreetly parked across the street. He didn't approach, didn't try to force a conversation. He simply stayed there, watching from a distance. And that continued to happen. Arthur was always nearby, but never crossed the boundaries she had set. In following days, Eleanor realized that he was silently trying to make his presence known. She saw him summertime stalking to the school principal as if he was asking about the child's routine. One day, picking up the child from nursery, she was surprised by the teacher, who mentioned that the child's father had stopped by and asked how he could help more with the adaptation. Arthur was trying, and she didn't know what to do with that. But it was the first time the child got sick that Eleanor saw the true impact of the change in him. The fever came in the middle of the night. The child tossed and turned in bed, his body hot and trembling, his breathing heavy. Eleanor was used to handling this alone. She prepared the medicine, wetting a cloth to put on his forehead, trying to calm him while whispering words of comfort. But deep down, she also felt fragile. In the middle of that silent night, a knock on the door made her jump. Her first thought was that it might be the neighbor, but when she opened, she found Arthur there. He looked nervous, high-sized, tired, as if he hadn't slept. "I heard he's sick," he said, hesitant, holding a bag with medicine and some fruit. "Do you need help?" Eleanor was speechless for a moment. He didn't ask if he could come in. He didn't demand anything. He simply offered his help. She could have refused him. She could have said everything was under control, but for the first time, something inside her hesitated. She stepped back, letting him pass. Arthur didn't talk much that night. He just sat by the child's bed, watching him sleep, and stayed there as if his simple presence was enough. Eleanor watched him from afar, her heart uneasy. When at some point Arthur gently touched the child's forehead, pushing away the sweat-dampened hair, she felt something break within her. He was trying, and she was beginning to see it. The first cracks in Eleanor's defenses. Do you believe Arthur's intentions are genuine? How would you handle this slow re-entry into your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the heartwarming conclusion. The following days brought small, almost imperceptible changes that Eleanor tried to ignore, but found impossible not to notice. Arthur didn't ask for anything, didn't insist on difficult conversations. He simply showed through subtle gestures that he was there. When Eleanor came home late from work, Sometimes she found hot tea in the kitchen, as if someone knew she would need it. The child began to tell her stories that Arthur read to him when they spent time together, about the games they played, about the drawings they now watched together. Ilalana began to wonder when exactly that empty space began to be filled by Arthur, and then one night it happened. She was in the kitchen making herself some tea after a long day when she felt his presence behind her. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't suffocating. He was simply there. She turned slowly and inadvertently. Their bodies brushed. It was an instant. A quick, almost insignificant touch, but the warmth of his arm against hers was enough to make her hold her breath. Time stopped. Arthur's eyes met hers, and there was something there Eleanor hadn't seen in years. A charged silence, an invisible weight, something they both felt, but neither dared to name. Her heart pounded in her chest. She pulled away quickly, as if she had touched fire. Arthur noticed, but said nothing. He just observed, and Eleanor knew that sooner rather than later. She could no longer ignore what was happening. The rain beat against the windows when Eleanor opened her front door that night. Exhaustion weighed on her shoulders like an anchor, and all she wanted was a hot bath and silence. But as she closed the door behind her, she realized the house was not enveloped in its usual stillness. On the contrary, a child's laughter echoed. From the living room, a light, carefree sound followed by a deep voice trying without much success to sound funny. Eleanor frowned and left her shoes in the hallway corner, walking slowly towards the living room, and then she saw him. Arthur was sitting on the floor with the child between his legs, holding two action figures and imitated tingigagged voices. The child laughed, his eyes shining with joy, completely absorbed in the game. Arthur made faces, dramatized every phrase, and with each clumsy gesture, the child's laughter exploded even louder. Eleanor stood there, unseen, just watching. Something inside her softened. She didn't remember the last time she saw her son so happy. She didn't remember a time when he had felt so safe, so complete. And suddenly, a thought she always avoided hit her hard. What if Arthur had never left? The scene in front of her seemed like an alternative version of the life they could have had. One where Arthur never disappeared, where he was present from the first crime, from the first steps, where her son never had to ask why he didn't have a father like the other children at school. She hugged her arms to her body, feeling a chill that didn't come from the rain outside. Arthur sensed her presence first. He looked up, and for an instant his eyes met hers. There was no surprise there, no guilt, just something deep and serene, as if he had been waiting for that moment for a long time. "You've really changed," she said, not realizing she had spoken aloud. Arthur held her gaze for longer than he should have, and then smiled. "It took too long, didn't it?" Eleanor looked away, her breathing irregular, perhaps, "but I'm seeing your effort." It was all she managed to say before leaving, not looking at him again. Later that night, after putting the child to bed, she found Arthur in the kitchen, organizing some papers that were scattered on the table. Ilalana hesitated at the door, watching. Him, the image of him therein in the heart of the house, seemed as natural as it was painful, as if it were a scene that should have existed much earlier, but was only now taking shape. He looked up when he sensed her presence. "Need help with this?" She took a deep breath, not knowing the exact reason, but instead of refusing, she simply nodded. Arthur pulled out a chair and began to organize the papers beside her. The silence that settled between the two was no longer laden with resentment or pain. It was a new silence, a silence where others' presence no longer bothered. At one point, their shoulders lightly touched. Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. Her body reacted before her mind. She turned her face inadvertently, and Arthur's eyes were there, fixed on her, deep, intense. Time seemed to slow down. The air grew heavier. There was something between, something unsaid, something growing in the space that separated them. Ilalana swallowed and looked away first. She wasn't ready yet, but Arthur noticed, and he knew that little by little, the barriers were beginning to crumble. The walls are coming down. Do you think Eleanor is ready to trust Arthur again after everything? What's the biggest leap of faith you've ever taken in love? Share your stories in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the heartwarming finale. The following days brought subtle, almost imperceptible changes, but where are they growing between them? Eleanor still tried to convince herself that she wasn't giving in, that her resistance remained intact, but the details didn't lie. The way Arthur's eyes discreetly followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he laughed with that child, a sound so familiar that it made something inside her twist. The naturalness with which he adapted to her routine without invading, without demanding, simply existing there in the space that was once his and that somehow seemed Tobe claiming again. That afternoon, while organizing some boxes in the living room closet, Eleanor felt his presence approaching. Arthur was by her side, before she could refuse his help, taking one of the boxes and holding it firm. The touch was an accident, a slip, a brief instant where their fingers met, but the effect was immediate. A shiver ran down her skin, and she froze in enthapment. He noticed it too. For a brief second, Arthur didn't let go of her hand. The warmth of his skin burned against hers. Familiar yet unfamiliar after so long. Eleanor held her breath, and when she finally pulled away, it was so abrupt that she almost dropped the box to the floor. "Thank you," she said too quickly, avoiding looking at him. "Arthur, Dad, insist." He just nodded, but his eyes remained on hers for a moment longer. Then necessary. That night, after the child was asleep, Eleanor went out to the balcony for air. The house seemed too small to contain the thoughts whirling inside her, the growing unease. The cold night wind blew against her face, and she closed her eyes for an instant, trying to find a space of calm within herself. It was then that she heard footsteps behind her. Arthur stopped beside her, saying nothing at first. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the sky the same way she was. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was laden with unexpressed meanings. "I still love you, did you know?" His voice cut through the air so unexpectedly that Eleanor felt her heart stop for a second. She turned slowly, but found no hesitation in his eyes. Only truth. Her chest tightened. "Arthur," she didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to feel. He looked down for an instant, then looked at her again, this time with something firmer in his voice. "I know you can't trust me. I know I destroyed this, but I will keep showing you I'm sorry for as long as it takes." Her heart pounded fiercely against her ribs. He didn't insist on a reply. He just left his words there, suspended between them, and went back into the house. In the following days, Eleanor tried not to think about it. She tried to ignore how her breathing quickened whenever he was near, how her gazine insisted on finding him, even when she didn't want to. But the truth was that something inside her had already given in. The following week, it was she who invited him to dinner. Arthur hesitated for a second when she extended the invitation, as if he hadn't heard correctly, but he accepted, and that night, he was there, sitting at the table, sharing a meal with her and the child, as if that were the future they sold have had from the beginning. At the moment of goodbye, they stood at the door for longer than necessary. Their child was already asleep, and the house was silent. Arthur's eyes met hers, and Alana knew. She knew the instant he let his gaze slide to her lips. The moment she felt her own body react before her mind, she leaned in first. She didn't think. She didn't analyze. She simply yielded. The kiss came. Like a shock, a reunion, a whirlwind of emotions that had been swallowed and repressed for too long. The taste was of longing, of pain, of desire. Arthur wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer to him, and Eleanor felt her heart beating again, as if waking after a long winter. As if for the first time in years, she was finally allowing herself to feel. The kiss was like a silent earthquake, shaking everything Eleanor thought she had under control. There were no longer any barriers, no excuses, just the moment that enveloped them, burning like a lit ember after being extinguished for so long. Arthur held her by the waist firmly, but unhurriedly, as if he feared any sudden movement would make her retreat. But she didn't retreat. Her body reacted headbore, her mind, her hands slid over his chest, her fingers clutching the fabric off his shirt, as if she needed an anchor point. The taste was familiar, yet different. The same Arthur as before, but now marked by time, by pain, by the guilt he carried like a constant shadow. When they finally separated, Arthur kept his eyes closed for an instant, as if he wanted to prolong. That moment, Eleanor, on the other hand, opened her eyes first. Her chest rose and fell irregularly, her thoughts disorganized, impossible to sort out. She began, but the words got lost in the air. Arthur opened his eyes, his intense brown eyes meeting hers with a depth that made her stomach churn. He said nothing, just waited. He waited for her to make her decision, for her to definite her next steps. And that's when Eleanor realized he was no longer going to force her into anything. He wasn't going to try to convince her with words, nor demand something she wasn't ready to give. Arthur was no longer the man whom they abandoned her. She took a deep breath, took a step back without completely letting go of his hand. "I need time." Her voice came out softer than she expected. Arthur nodded with the hesitation. "As much time as you need." The days that followed were different. There was no more suffocating tension between them, nor the need to prove something all the time. Arthur remained present, but now no longer as a weight from the past. He was there because he wanted to be, because he chose to stay. For the first time, Ilalonina realized how much her son also felt that change. The child smiled more, talked more, listened to bedtime stories, and knew that the next day his father would still be near. It was on a sunny afternoon at the park when everything finally seemed to click into place. The child ran ahead, laughing as he played at jumping over the chalk drawings on the pavement. Arthur was by her side, hands in his pockets, his gaze lost in the scene before him. "I'm still afraid," Eleanor confessed suddenly. Arthur turned to her but didn't interrupt. She sighed, crossing her arms, afraid to believe and be disappointed again. "Afraid that my son will get attached to you and one day you'll decide he's no longer worth it." Arthur took a step forward, hesitant, but determined. "I'm never going to run away again." His voice carried an undeniable weight. He extended his hand, fingers slightly open, waiting for her to make her decision. Eleanor looked at that hand, at the man in front of her. She thought about the past, about the pain, but she also thought about the present, about the effort, about the change. Then, for the first time in years, shekels to trust. Her smile was small, almost hesitant, but genuine as she intertwined her fingers with his. Then let's build this opportunity together. Arthur squeezed her hand, and for the first time, Eleanor felt the weight on her shoulders finally begin to disappear. They didn't have a happy ending, but they had a new beginning,